People like to say every child is loved the same. I believed that when I was little. It took years for me to understand that some families don't divide their affection equally. They simply decide who deserves the spotlight and who can survive in the shadows. I grew up in a modest home outside Knoxville, Tennessee, where my mother had a favorite, and she never tried very hard to hide it. That favorite was my younger sister Rachel. Whenever relatives came over, Rachel was dressed in a brand new outfit with perfectly curled hair, proudly showing off another dance trophy or pageant ribbon. I stood nearby wearing clothes she had already outgrown, smiling politely whenever someone asked if I planned to compete too. Before I could answer, my mother always would. "Emily isn't interested in those things," she'd say with a dismissive smile. She's practical. I wasn't practical. I simply learned very early that asking for anything usually ended with disappointment. When Rachel wanted ballet lessons, my mother found the money. When she dreamed of attending summer camps, somehow the budget stretched. When she talked about college, a savings account had already been waiting for years. At 6, I got my first job serving waffles, coffee, and hash browns at the local diner before sunrise. My mother called it building character. Looking back, I think it was easier for her to send me to work than to invest in my future. Oddly enough, those long shifts became my greatest education. I met kind strangers who encouraged me to keep studying. Teachers helped me apply for scholarships. Nurses who stopped in after overnight hospital shifts shared stories that fascinated me. They spoke about caring for the tiniest patients imaginable. Newborns fighting for every breath. And I realized that was exactly where I wanted my life to lead. Nothing came easily. There were nights I worked until closing, slept only a few hours, then attended classes with coffee replacing breakfast. I questioned myself more times than I can count, but every obstacle strengthened my resolve. Years later, after earning my nursing degree and spending countless hours learning my profession, I accepted a position in the neonatal intensive care unit. Eventually, I became the head nurse, trusted to care for babies, whose lives often depended on the smallest decisions. Around that same time, I met Michael, a firefighter whose steady kindness made me believe that home wasn't always a place. It could be a person. For the first time in my life, I felt chosen instead of tolerated. Little did I know that the greatest test of everything I had built wasn't waiting at the hospital. It was waiting inside my own family, and it would begin with a phone call that changed everything after my grandmother quietly slipped away. The next part will reveal the aftermath of Grandma's passing, the surprising contents of her will, and the first hints that she had been keeping secrets for many years, ending with another compelling cliffhanger. The call came early on a gray Tuesday morning, even before I answered. Mo system. Something in my heart told me what I was about to hear. My grandmother had passed peacefully in her sleep. For a long moment, I simply sat at the kitchen table with the phone still in my hand. Michael quietly wrapped an arm around my shoulders, saying nothing. He knew how much Grandma had meant to me. She had been the one person in my childhood who never made me feel like I had to earn her affection. Whenever life at home became too heavy, she found small ways to remind me I mattered. Sometimes it was a handwritten birthday card with a few folded bills tucked inside. Other times it was an afternoon at her little lake cabin, where we would fish from the dock, drink sweet tea on the porch, and watch the sun disappear behind the trees. She never spoke badly about my mother, but she didn't pretend not to notice the difference in how Rachel and I were treated. Instead, she would squeeze my hand and quietly say, "One day, you'll understand your worth without needing anyone else's permission." At the funeral, my mother cried loudly enough for everyone to hear. Rachel stayed close beside her, greeting relatives and accepting sympathy with practiced grace. I mourned differently. I stood beside Grandma's casket, remembering the woman who had believed in me long before I believed in myself. A week later, The family gathered at the attorney's office for the shriek of her read of her will. The atmosphere felt strangely tense. My mother kept whispering about preserving family traditions, while Rachel casually mentioned how wonderful it would be if the lake cabin stayed in the immediate family. I almost smiled at that comment. As far as I knew, none of us had any idea what Grandma had decided. When the attorney finally opened the folder, the room became completely still. He explained that Grandma had left a few personal keepsakes to various relatives, donated a portion of her savings to a local children's charity, and then paused before reading the final pages. The family lake cabin, he said, is to be transferred solely to my granddaughter, Emily. My mother's smile vanished instantly. Rachel stared at me in complete disbelief. Before either of them could speak, the attorney reached for another sealed envelope. There is one additional item, he continued. Mrs. Harper instructed me to give this directly to Emily after the will is read. She requested that no one else open it. I accepted the envelope with trembling hands. Whatever Grandma had placed inside, she had wanted only me to see it. As my mother watched me from across the room, I realized this envelope held far more than a final goodbye. It was the beginning of a truth someone had spent decades trying to keep buried. Part 3 will reveal the contents of Grandma's envelope, the hidden financial records, and the shocking discovery that someone had quietly diverted money meant for Emily for years. Setting the stage for the unforgettable family dinner, I didn't open Grandma's envelope in the attorney's office. Something about the way she had sealed it made it feel deeply personal, almost sacred. I wanted to read her final words somewhere quiet, somewhere I could hear my own thoughts instead of my mother's complaints echoing through the room. That evening, after Michael put our daughter to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The envelope rested in front of me. My hands trembled as I carefully broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter, several bank statements, photocopies of canceled checks, and a neatly organized folder labeled FOCO, for Emily when the time is right. I unfolded the letter first. Grandma's familiar handwriting instantly brought tears to my eyes. She wrote that she had watched my life unfold with both pride and heartbreak. She knew I had grown up believing I simply wasn't good enough, but she wanted me to understand that none of it had ever been my fault. Then her words took an unexpected turn. For years, she explained, she had set aside money whenever she could. Tips from long shifts at the diner, holiday bonuses, birthday cash she never spent, even small amounts saved from grocery coupons. It wasn't a fortune, but she had intended every dollar to help me build a future. She had trusted my mother to deliver that support. Instead, she slowly realized much of the money never reached me. The documents in the folder proved it. Every check was carefully copied, every withdrawal had a date. Besides several entries, Grandma had written short notes in blue ink: Emily's college fund. Birthday gift not received. Nursing textbooks. Emergency savings. Again and again, the records showed the same pattern. Funds Grandma intended for me had been redirected elsewhere. Sometimes the amounts were small. Other times they were enough to cover an entire semester of school. I wasn't angry because of the money. I was devastated because someone had stolen years of opportunity while allowing me to believe I simply had to struggle harder than everyone else. Michael quietly walked into the kitchen and found me staring at the papers. Without saying a word, he read through several pages before looking up. "This isn't a misunderstanding," he said softly. "She documented everything." I nodded. "I don't even know what to do with all of this." For several days, I carried the folder from room to room without making a decision. Part of me wanted to lock it away forever. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice sounded unusually cheerful as she invited Michael, our daughter, and me to a special family dinner to celebrate new beginnings. As soon as I hung up, I looked at the blue folder still resting on the kitchen counter. For the first time, I wondered if Grandma hadn't just left me evidence. Maybe she had left me the courage to finally place the truth on the table where everyone would have to face it. The dinner was scheduled for Sunday evening. By the time Michael, our daughter, and I arrived, my mother's dining room looked exactly as it had when I was growing up. The polished wooden table gleamed under the chandelier. A pitcher of sweet tea sat in the center beside homemade biscuits and the casserole my grandmother used to make for every family gathering. For a brief moment, I wondered if things could simply stay peaceful. Then I remembered the folder resting inside my bag. Rachel greeted us with a warm smile, completely unaware of what I had brought. She chatted about work, upcoming vacations, and how wonderful it was that the family could finally move forward together. My mother seemed unusually pleasant, asking about the hospital and complimenting our little girl. It felt rehearsed, almost as though she believed enough kindness could erase decades of distance. Dinner passed with polite conversation. When dessert was served, and everyone reached for slices of pecan pie, I quietly removed the blue folder from my bag. Without saying a word, I placed it beside my mother's glass of sweet tea. The room fell silent. "What's this?" she asked, forcing a smile. "I think Grandma wanted all of us to understand why she made the choices she did," I replied calmly. She opened the folder. At first, her expression barely changed. Then she turned another page. And another. The color slowly drained from her face. Rachel leaned over, curious, then picked up several of the documents herself. As she read the handwritten notes and compared them with the bank records, tears filled her eyes. "You told me," she whispered, struggling to find the words. "You always said Grandma never helped Emily because she believed Emily wanted to make it on her own." No one answered. The silence was louder than any argument. Rachel continued reading until she reached the copies of the checks intended for my education. She looked from the papers to our mother, her voice breaking. "Was any of that true?" Again, there was no explanation, no denial, only a woman staring at a lifetime of decisions she could no longer hide behind excuses. I wasn't there to embarrass her. I wasn't seeking revenge. I simply wanted the truth to exist in the open, where it could no longer be rewritten. We left quietly that evening, no shouting, no dramatic confrontation. Just the unmistakable weight of honesty settling over a family that had spent years pretending everything was fair. My mother has never called to apologize. In fact, she hasn't spoken to me since that night. Strangely, I no longer wait for the phone to ring, because I finally understand something my grandmother tried to teach me all along. Family isn't defined by the chair someone claims at the table. It's defined by the love they bring before there's anything to inherit. And some seats were never meant for people who only remember your name after the will is read. The weeks after that dinner were quieter than I expected. I kept waiting for the angry phone calls, the accusations, or even a demand that I return the cabin. None of it came. Instead, there was silence. Rachel sent one short message a few days later. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry." I believed her. She had benefited from years of favoritism, but she hadn't created it. Like me, she had grown up believing the story she had been told. The difference was that my version made me feel forgotten, while hers made her believe everything had always been fair. We met for coffee several weeks later. For the first time in our lives, we talked honestly, not as the successful daughter and the responsible daughter, but simply as two sisters trying to understand the family that had shaped us. She cried more than once, so did I. Neither of us could change the past. But we agreed we didn't want our children to inherit the same invisible competition that had stolen so many years from us. As for my mother, she chose distance. Birthdays passed without a card. Holidays came and went without an invitation. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. But with every passing month, the pain became lighter. I stopped chasing a relationship that had always depended on pretending everything was fine. Instead, I focused on the family Michael and I were building. On warm weekends, we began spending more time at Grandma's lake cabin. We repaired the old dock, planted flowers along the porch, and hung a wooden swing where Grandma's rocking chair used to sit. Our daughter loved feeding the ducks each morning, and every time I watched her laugh without fear of being compared to anyone else, I felt as though another piece of my childhood was finally healing. One afternoon, while sorting through an old cedar chest in the cabin, I found a recipe card tucked inside one of Grandma's cookbooks. Across the bottom, in her familiar handwriting, she had written just one sentence. "The greatest inheritance you can leave isn't money. It's making someone feel they always belonged." I framed that card. Today, it hangs in our kitchen where everyone can see it. The trust fund Grandma built helped secure our daughter's future. The cabin became a place where our family gathers, not because of what it's worth, but because of the memories we continue to create there. Looking back, I don't think Grandma left me those gifts to reward me. She left them to remind me that my value had never depended on my mother's approval. Sometimes the richest inheritance isn't hidden in a bank account or written into a will. Sometimes it's the courage to end a cycle that should have ended generations ago. And if my story leaves you with one lesson, let it be this: never measure your worth by the seat someone else offers you at their table. Build your own table, fill it with honesty, kindness, and people who choose to be there long before there's anything to gain. Because love that has to compete for a place was never truly love to begin with.